Today, we are indeed honored to have with us Nelson Mandela, the President of the Republic of South Africa. We at the National Press Club have followed the struggles of South Africa closely. To our podium have come Oliver Tambo, Chief Buthelezi, and President F.W. de Klerk. The conflict has been a focal point of our generation of journalists. But in all of history, there have been few struggles with such satisfying outcomes. South Africa has been able to transform itself into a truly democratic country without being torn by ethnic fighting and division that is destroying so many other countries in the post-Cold War world. Much of the credit for that must go to our speaker today. Released from 27 years of imprisonment, he did not sound a call to arms and rally his forces in bloody revolution. He has served as a statesman and conciliator who preached forgiveness to bring together all of his nation's competing interests. Now his goal is to help bring democracy, peace, and prosperity to all of Africa, and to celebrate, as he said yesterday to a joint session of Congress, the oneness of the human race. Every generation produces but a few giants, those people whose accomplishments define their times and last in the history books. Ladies and gentlemen, we are privileged to have one of those people here with us today. Please join me in a warm Press Club welcome for Nelson Mandela, the President of the Republic of South Africa.
Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, I told a story when I was having lunch at the White House. And I think in view of the generous comments which have been made by the chairperson, I should repeat that story so as to put his remarks in context. Because one day I was visited by a young lady of 4 from next door. I was sitting in the lounge and she just broke in. She didn't knock. She did not greet. And then she said to me, "How old are you?" I said, "Well, I can't remember, but I was born long, long ago." She said, "A year ago?" I said, "No, longer than that." 2 years? I said, "Much longer than that." "But how long?" I said, "Well, I've told you that I can't remember, but it was a long time." Then she suddenly switched a subject and said, "Why did you go to jail?" I said, "No, I didn't go to jail because I liked. Some people sent me there. Oh, people who don't like me. How long did you remain there?" I said, "Well, again, I can't remember, but it was a very, very long time." And she repeated 1, 2 years, and my answer was the same. And then she asked again, "But how long?" So I say, "Well, I've already told you I can't remember, but it was a long time." And she said, "You are a stupid old man." And having said so, she continued to chat with me. We were there for about an hour as if she had paid me a compliment. So, ladies and gentlemen, if I don't rise to expectations, Please be more diplomatic than that young lady. I must also say that I have looked forward to addressing this club. The press is one of the foundations of liberty, of freedom. And any country which is committed to democratic values will ensure that there is freedom of the press and that journalists are able to write freely and without fear, and that the conduct of public officials in particular should always be under the searchlight. We have just graduated from being members of the liberation movement, in which we have sacrificed a great deal. If you met some of the leaders of the liberation movement, you will feel the gravity of the crime that has been committed by the apartheid government in our country. Some of these men went to prison with only standard 6, and they left prison with a degree, sometimes 2 degrees, and even 3 degrees. There were men who went to prison who had master's degrees, even doctorates, obtained in overseas universities. These were men of ability, committed to the values of liberty and freedom. And I have complete trust in them. But the dictum is that power corrupts, and it corrupts absolutely. And history knows some of the passionate freedom fighters who, when they became members of the government, forgot that they were put in those positions by the masses of people, some of them illiterate, inarticulate, but who wanted a shelter over their heads, work to bring out their children, clothe them in dignity. And power can make people who once promoted those values to forget that mandate. It is for the press to keep the ideas of liberty alive, to ensure that public figures carry out their mandate. And we use the press must be used as a mirror from which public figures can see whether they are on the right track. And I therefore jumped at the opportunity of attending this meeting and addressing you. Returning to my written speech, may I first express my profound and heartfelt appreciation for the honor of being here today before this distinguished gathering of the doyen of American journalists and other eminent guests. I would like also to express our collective thanks as South Africans for the support which our struggle for democracy received from the United States media as a leading component of the international media. In the darkest days of apartheid and political repression, when our organizations were banned and thousands of South Africans faced imprisonment, torture, and even death, and when our local media was severely censored, the international media laid bare the terrible conditions in our country and kept the world alive to the issue of apartheid. When our voice was silenced, you lent your voices to our demand for freedom of expression and information, and gave support to South African writers, artists, and journalists who were persecuted for daring to use their skills against tyranny and in support of freedom. The South African media, journalists and publishers alike, are indebted to you for that sustenance. Our media now enjoy rights that democratic societies like yours have taken for granted for many years. These rights are written into our Constitution. The Constitution also guarantees that all media financed by or under the control of the state shall be regulated in a manner which ensures impartiality and the expression of a diversity of opinion. Our experience of repression and of persecution has only strengthened the commitment to the rights of freedom of information, freedom of expression, and freedom of the press, not merely as constitutional rights, but as a daily reality. You'll excuse me, you'll find me now and again wiping my eyes. There's nothing wrong. This is my unique way of attracting attention to myself. Our country has come a long way from the dark days of oppression and conflict. An enduring national consensus has been forged, founded on a deep and shared conviction that the only way forward is to unite our people on the basis of reconciliation and reconstruction. The interim constitution and reconstruction and development program reflected that consensus in clear and concrete terms. It is on these basic principles that the legitimacy of the government of national unity is founded. Among our most urgent tasks in South Africa is consolidating democracy. However, unless we successfully start addressing the question of economic growth, development, and the equitable distribution of wealth and income to end the inequities of apartheid, we would not, in any convincing manner, be able to speak of social stability and justice. Yesterday before Congress, I thanked the United States for its generous assistance with the reconstruction and development in South Africa. But I also made it clear that while such aid does make a valuable contribution to our development, it cannot solve our economic problems. We are not looking for handouts. Rather, we seek to build a partnership which the United States administration, business and other sectors to benefit both our nations. Our economy has started to show recovery, signs of recovery, and all indications are that this will be sustained. This is in great measure a result of the political achievements we have made, particularly the setting up of legitimate structures which are a fundamental departure from the era of apartheid mismanagement. This, however, will not be easy. But precisely because our programs are based on sound economic policies, including the expansion of our economic and fiscal base, they are bound to give a spur to economic growth. The government is creating, with a great measure of success, an environment in which a small and big business can thrive. We are committed to fiscal discipline and prudent management of national resources. Our efforts are underpinned by the commitment to involve society as a whole in reconstruction and development. We are therefore building an enduring partnership among all social structures, including government, business, and labor. This is a partnership that should see to the restructuring of our industries to make them more competitive in international markets, improve the productivity in the workplace, and imparting of skills to all employees. It is a partnership to which not only the government, but also organized business and labor are committed, and which underwrites our newly formed National Economic Development and Labor Council. The council, involving government, business, and labor, will be the blast furnace of joint strategies for sustained economic growth and equity. I have stressed this because it is something that has been left out of the picture, which has been portrayed by some sections of the media. According to this one-sided picture, South Africa is battling under the weight of labor unrest. In actual fact, the reality is that the collective bargaining system in our country is a healthy one, and the most strategic industries have this year resolved their disputes without resorting to strike action. Besides, in bringing our labor legislation up to date with the new political realities, emphasis will be placed on efficient and effective dispute resolution mechanism. Now, some people judge what is happening in South Africa on the surface without delving deep and to see the real underlying reasons for the industrial turmoil that sparked off round about June, July. You may not be aware in our country that white workers who are doing the same job, identical job with a black worker, that is an African, colored, or Indian, white workers received between 3 to 5 times more wages than black workers. And the workers are fighting to close this gap. And that is why we are fully behind them, because that is a just struggle. And if the government of the country has allowed a situation to develop where blacks can see their white counterpart doing the same jobs, enjoying incomes far out of proportion to those received by blacks, you will agree that every Democrat will support the struggle of the workers to come to the same level as white workers. But the labor movement in our country is led by a highly talented and seasoned group of leaders who know how to think and to relate their problems to the welfare of the country as a whole. I spoke to them. I called the whole leadership of the Congress of South African Trade Unions, and I said to them, we have just taken over the government of this country, but at the present moment we merely occupy political office. We do not exercise real political power. To acquire political power is not something that can be achieved overnight. It is a process. It is going to take a year, 2, and even as much as 5 years. We are here to end all discrimination in all its ramifications. But don't embarrass us in that task, because you have got an army of 5 million people unemployed. We want business to expand in order to absorb these 5 million people. That is the situation, therefore, about the labor unrest, of which many people have made a mountain from. We also know that through the complex filters of international media, the public in the United States may have a perception of our country as one in which crime and lawlessness loom large. Crime is indeed a serious problem, and one which concerns us deeply. But the most important development in this regard is the transformation of a police force regarded by most South Africans as illegitimate into one based on community policing. Impressive progress, which has multiplied the success of our police services, has been made. We have already, in a very short time, transformed the police force, which was set up, built, and developed on the basis of supporting apartheid and color repression. They were told that any political demonstration by blacks against white supremacy, no matter how constitutional, how peaceful, how non-violent, is a declaration of war against white minority rule. It must be brutally suppressed. For the last 45 years, the police force in our country concentrated not on suppressing ordinary crime. They concentrated on suppressing the liberation movement. In the process, criminals organized themselves into powerful syndicates, and in some areas, they virtually took over the running of the life of the community. And especially because the previous government had no interest in protecting its black citizens. Of the police force of our country, only 20% was deployed in the black areas. And that is a vast population of 4 million, in which there are only 5 million whites. The rest of the police force was deployed in white areas, and only 20% in black areas. And the members of the police deployed in black areas were working under the most difficult conditions, where they had no transport of their own. They had to use public transport. Each policeman, each detective, investigating at one time as much as 60 different cases. You can see, therefore, in that situation, the criminals formed a powerful syndicates. It is those syndicates that were busy now dismantling, throwing those hardened criminals behind bars. We have already reduced the level of crime considerably. But of course, because these criminals had become so powerful that they actually recruited even members of the police into their syndicates, we have to clean the police force of elements who were involved in this corruption, drug smuggling. But having said so, I must tell you that the overwhelming majority of the police were nonetheless men and women of integrity who did their work according to law and who helped to ensure that these elections take place and that there is this smooth transformation. And we must therefore not get a distorted picture of what is happening with our security forces. However, in the overall, what is required is deliberate speed in implementing the reconstruction and development program to remove the causes of the instability and mistrust of the past. This the government has started undertaking in earnest, in close cooperation with all sectors of the population. The logic of the change through which South Africans are going demands of each and every institution an examination of the part that it can play. This naturally includes the media, and if I may suggest it here, includes the international media. I was struck by a recent remark of a leading American businessman in South Africa. He said that there were two things that bred an extraordinary caution in potential US investors in South Africa. They know all about South Africa's past. They know what the country has been through to achieve its miracle. But they also know the history of Africa. It is crucial that an objective and even critical appraisal of South Africa and Africa as a whole should not be based on a pessimistic reading of the past. Rather, it should be a full and accurate reflection of the hopes, the aspirations, and optimism of the present. It should also be a reflection of the fears and even apprehensions as they currently prevail. In this way, the magnitude of the achievements South Africans have made will come out in bold relief. In fact, many problems that we may have would fade into insignificance against this background. They will be understood in the context of the real miracle playing itself out on the southern tip of the African continent. The international media can play as crucial a role in the rebuilding of South Africa and the rebirth of Africa as they did in the struggle for freedom and democracy. During the course of my visit, I touched on the multilateral interest South Africa takes in international issues. These include the following: prevention of the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, promotion of democracy and human rights, economic development based on mutually beneficial relations, prevention of the international trafficking in narcotics, and global environmental issues. During my visit to the United Nations on Monday, I had occasion to sign a number of treaties on human rights and socio-economic issues. In this regard, South Africa is taking her rightful place among the community of democratic nations. With regard to the U.S. in particular, I should emphasize that we have made great progress during the course of this visit regarding issues such as trade, joint efforts to mobilize funds for investments in South Africa, assistance to black entrepreneurs, cooperation in matters of human rights, including the judiciary, and so on. In other words, a new partnership is being born between our two countries and governments. We are indebted in particular to the Clinton administration for the unprecedented cooperation and understanding evidenced before and during the course of our visit. We in South Africa are determined to succeed in our endeavors, and we are confident that with the assistance of the international community, we will do so. I leave the United States of America with many fond memories and confident that we have laid the basis for full and mutually beneficial relations. I thank you.
Where do you draw your strength?
Well, I wish I could be able to hate and to revenge for the injustice that was done to me. But my country and the world are giving me little opportunity for retribution. There is a lot of work to be done. And you must remember that you pass through this world but once. And if you commit yourself to a particular approach, you will be judged by that approach. It is better to commit yourself to those things which are constructive, which help to put sunshine in the hearts of men and women. And I have found that approach to be extremely important. And by the way, I must tell you that here I am no exception. I shared prison with wonderful comrades who perhaps are far better than me in forgetting the past and working to unite the nation, to bring happiness to the people of South Africa, the people of our continent, and to humanity as a whole. We have to acknowledge the support which we have received throughout the democratic world. As I said the other day, it matters little to us which government is in power in a particular country, because all of them condemn racial oppression. And the trust that is vested in us demands a sense of responsibility which is higher than merely being free to do what you like. We are expected to deliver the goods. And if you rely on the support, which has been there before I came out of prison, if you rely on that support, it is possible for us to solve the most sensitive problems. And I therefore have no time to think in terms of bitterness, of retribution.
This questioner asks, if the South African economy fails to meet the reasonable expectations of the black people, what political consequences do you foresee, and how much time do you have?
Well, the rest of the question is actually irrelevant. It is the first part that is important. Our people are perfectly entitled to have unreasonable expectations, because, as I have said, whites in our country enjoy rights and privileges which are denied to the majority. And our people can see in our neighboring countries discrimination of all kinds having been removed. Their own country, where they have been responsible for producing the wealth in that country, is shared by a tiny minority. And therefore they are entitled to have unrealistic and exaggerated expectations. But in the run-up to the elections, those who are students of South African politics, they will notice that in practically every meeting in the run-up to the elections, I said to our people, we have a strategy, a master strategy, the Reconstruction and Development Program. It is intended to better the lives of all South Africans without exception, to build houses, to create jobs, to build hospitals and clinics, schools, to bring in electricity, because the overwhelming majority of our people have no electricity, to bring in running water. Our people in the countryside in particular have no running water. And this is the object of this master strategy. But I pointed out that don't think this is an event that when you return from the polls on the 27th of April, you'll find a job waiting for you and a Mercedes for you to ride. It is going to take a number of years before we can deliver. But the important point is that from the 28th of April, we will be coming back to you to report to you what we plan to do in order to solve the problems that face you. We'll come back and tell you, we have already, in spite of the formidable problems that we face, made a great deal of progress. There was an examination both in the national and international press, what we had achieved in 100 days, because some American president started that tradition. They forget that in the United States, you had an infrastructure throughout your public life. In our country, we do not have that infrastructure to bring about these changes. We introduced, as from the 1st of September, free medical treatment for children under 6 and for pregnant mothers. The response of the community was overwhelming. But because we have few hospitals, few clinics, few doctors, few nurses, the crowds, the queues were terribly long. And sometimes we had to ask people to go back and come the following day because we don't have the infrastructure. In education, we have already started feeding about 1 million school children where there is need. But again, we're faced with the question of the infrastructure. You mobilize resources, you buy food, and the first difficulty you have, there is no accommodation where you can put this food. Because in the countryside in particular, people are living under hunger, starvation. When they see food, the first thing a person thinks of is his own stomach, not the stomach of the children. And so we have to find some shelters, some buildings where we can keep the stores, the supplies, where they can be kept under lock and key, and so that they can reach the children for whom they are meant. These are the problems that are facing us, the question of infrastructure. And to have expected us to have brought about changes which were brought about by President Roosevelt within the first 100 years is completely unrealistic in terms of our situation. But nevertheless, we are making progress. And the masses of the people are responding very well. I am now in the process of going around the country, reporting to our people what we have done since the 27th of April. And the jubilation, the ovation, the standing ovation, when they hear the plans that we have, the small beginnings that we've made, the question, therefore, of impatience of our people does not arise. Because in these meetings which I have addressed, people understand that socio-economic issues take a long time before they can be addressed.
I understand that you're going to leave here and meet with President Aristide of Haiti. What advice can you give him in terms of how to bring about reconciliation and nation building?
Well, I'm very reluctant to discuss with the media what I'm going to discuss with the president of the country. It is not a respect to a head of state. There is enough time for us, after we've had a discussion, to agree with him as to what press statement we should issue. This is the proper approach. But of course, you are the media. And I know how cross you're going to be if I don't tell you, if I don't take you into confidence. I don't know if the media can be taken into confidence about anything. But I'm sure President Aristide, who is, by the way, my friend, I'll be meeting him now for the third time. I'm sure we will not mind when I say that he requested to see me, and I gladly agreed, because I can see the problems that he has in his country. And I am prepared to share with him the humble experience we have had in our own country. In our own country, we realized that such a hopelessly divided society, characterized throughout the centuries, especially during the last 4 decades, by conflict and turmoil, it was necessary for us to have a strategy of involving all political leaders, even those who had about 50 or 25 members. We felt that they should be involved in negotiations. At one time, because of our caution to ensure an all-embracing process, we had no less than 26 different political parties. And what we relied upon is not the majority which the ANC commanded. It was the question of consensus, of persuading people through the strength of your argument. And that method succeeded. In this long drawn process of negotiations, not once have we ever used a vote where our majority would prevail. We appealed to the power of reasoning of human beings, and that to whatever political party they belong, there are good men who will embrace a good argument, a solid argument. And we succeeded in that. Then we came to the question now, what to do with people who had committed crimes during these last 45 years. It was not an easy matter because we are dealing with cases where people have lost their beloveds. And we have to look at the matter from both sides. But we said the opponents of apartheid, that is ourselves, people were in exile, like the foreign minister here, and like my speech writer, who's somewhere around here, Joel Netichenze. They were in exile. They came back, they were asked to apply for an indemnity, and they were told to explain precisely what offense, what crime they had committed for which they wanted indemnity. We did that. Now, we want those who defended apartheid also to do the same thing. And we want them to do that because we wanted to be even-handed. And those people who committed offenses such as we committed, those must be indemnified. Now, that process of being even-handed has brought about unparalleled unity in our country. Because now, having pardoned people who committed offenses in the course of implementing their own political objectives as members of political organizations, and that amnesty, that indemnity, has helped to inspire confidence that the country is led by people who want to forget the past. But of course, and that is what I want to say to the president, but of course there are cases where we say we cannot give any amnesty. That is of highly placed officials who sat down to plan the killing, the assassination of innocent civilians who were not threat at all to white supremacy, who were eliminated simply because they wanted equality with the whites and nothing more, were never involved in the armed struggle. Now those, we are saying that they must be brought before a commission, a commission of truth and reconciliation. And we are saying this body is not going to be a court of law. It won't have any power of arresting and charging anybody. All that it is going to do, it is going to address the concerns of the victims of these crimes, because indemnity and amnesty addresses the concerns of the perpetrators of the crimes. And that Truth and Reconciliation Commission is going to address the case of the victims. They are, the parents, the next of kin, are going to know what happened to their beloveds. And when they know, it will be easy for them to forgive. And if anybody has committed an unpardonable crime, the police are free to charge, and if there's sufficient evidence, the courts can convict them. That is our approach, and that is the information I'm going to share with my friend.
starting to get close to the end, but I want to ask one more question before I get to the last question, which is, what do you see as the role of South Africa in the rest of the continent, especially as a peacemaker in places like Angola?
Well, the continent of Africa has produced worthy sons and daughters of caliber, talented people who have been trying to address these problems in their individual capacities and sometimes collectively. I am not keen to get caught up in the problems of any country, either in our region or elsewhere in Africa, unilaterally. Individual responses in these cases are not as effective as an organized and disciplined machinery to address problems. We are members of the United Nations. We are members of the Commonwealth of Nations. We are members of the Organization of African Unity. We are members of the non-aligned movement. And our approach is that we should work through structures which have been set up and which have resources to address problems. That is our approach. We'll try as much as possible to avoid unilateral action. But of course, we have been asked at times to be interested in trying to address the problems in a particular country. For example, the special representative of the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Bayer, visited my country and asked me to help in bringing about peace in Angola. In that regard, I was not acting unilaterally. I was acting as one who was supporting an initiative taken by the United Nations. And therefore, I was able to see President dos Santos, President Maputo, and President Chissano of Mozambique, and to discuss how we could bring about a solution in Angola. I also invited Dr. Savimbi to come, although he sent his emissaries to prepare for the visit. I'm still waiting for him to come. We have been able to get involved in Lesotho, which is a small kingdom surrounded by South Africa, when the king of that country dissolved a democratically elected government, which has swept all the seats in the election 2 years ago. Well, we condemned the action of the king, but we didn't stop there. President Mugabe of Zimbabwe, President Kwetmasira of Botswana, and myself got interested in this and had discussions with both parties, the deposed prime minister as well as the king. I invited them to Pretoria, and were able to resolve the matter. There is peace now in that country. In that way, where I am acting through existing structures, I am prepared to play my role. But I am not prepared alone to try and bring solutions to the troubled areas.
Just a reminder that Mr. Mandela will have to leave in a hurry after we're finished here, and we ask you all to remain seated until he has been able to get out of the room. Before asking the last question, of course, I'd like to present you with a certificate of appreciation for appearing here. And now that you have joined the pantheon of world leaders, you have to have your own National Press Club mug.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
The last question is, we know that you are.
Thank you.
We know that you are an avid boxing fan. What did Muhammad Ali tell you yesterday about the outlook for the next heavyweight bout?
Well, my Muhammad Ali is one of my heroes. He is a man who brought a new dimension to boxing. And many of you, especially those who have got white hair, will remember some of the colorful statements he made. He said before one fight, "I will float like a butterfly and sting like a bee." And on one occasion he said, "I am so handsome that my face should be declared a natural resource." And he talked about another boxer whose name I won't mention. And he says, "So-and-so's face is so ugly that it should be donated to the Bureau of Wildlife." In fact, he was talking about a handsome gentleman who is also my friend. Well, we didn't have the opportunity. I met him last night. I didn't have the opportunity of discussing the matter with him. Even if I had, and he told me his opinion, I wouldn't respect them, certainly not. And I support the best boxer, whoever it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Somebody sent us up with a check for $1,000 to donate to I don't know what it is.
I say, well, can I say I have received a check for $1,000, and I will read the accompanying letter and respond positively. But we have friends in many parts of the globe, and that donation is an indication of how the people of the United States care. It will go to the Children's Fund, which I have established in order to address the question of street children. Children in jail, about 20,000 of them, one of whom is 13 years, are languishing in jail. And some of them have been there for 2 years. And then abused children. I have established a fund for that purpose. And this amount will go to that fund. Thank you.